Voice is about to be heard.
אתם צופים בערוץ החדשות i24 News.
i24 News launches its fourth channel in Hebrew, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
ותיעדו את הטבח.
i24 News in Hebrew brings its international success for the past 10 years to Israel. Real-time news, sharp analyses, and passionate debates on the burning issues shaping Israeli society and the entire Middle East. And for you, English-speaking viewers, i24 News offers a unique, immersive experience. Every day until 11 a.m. EST, Hebrew programs will be broadcast live with English subtitles. And from 11 a.m. EST, back to your favorite shows in English. More than ever, the heart of a new Middle East beats on i24 News.
Hello everyone, this is i24 News. First, our headlines. The IDF announced the death of 11 soldiers over the weekend. Netanyahu's main partners in the war cabinet accused the Prime Minister of deceiving them. And the protest movement demanding elections is set to drive up demonstrations throughout Israel this week. The IDF announced the death of 11 soldiers over the weekend in 3 separate incidents, the largest being an armored carrier that blew up with 8 soldiers inside. We'll start off with i24 News' Zach Anders near the Israeli-Gaza border with the latest. Zach.
Hi, good afternoon. We're learning more about that incident that began yesterday morning around 5 a.m. I'm told by the IDF that the carrier, the APC, armored personnel carrier that was struck, killed everyone inside, all 8 inside this APC. And what struck them is the big question. The IDF says they believe potentially it was a remotely detonated roadside bomb or some kind of rocket fired on the ground that was unable to be detected, or some anti-tank guided missile. That's not clear at this point, the investigation ongoing. Killing those 8 soldiers, most of them in their young 20s, the youngest being 19 years old. The second incident occurring yesterday afternoon in northern Gaza, a tank, the IDF says, was affixed with some kind of explosive. The language around here and some of the questions that we have not been answered at this point in the night. It's a bit curious as to what exactly happened here, because they're saying that it was, quote, affixed. The explosive was placed on the tank, and then the blast killing 2 inside the tank, seriously injuring 2 additional soldiers inside that tank as well. And then a additional soldier who was injured about a week ago died from his wounds, bringing the total yesterday of soldiers killed to 11. This is one of the deadliest days inside the Gaza Strip since the war began, and the IDF says in those 2 incidents involving the tank blast and the APC blast that the investigation could continue for several days.
Right. Zach, thank you for this update. Here in the studio with me are Itamar Yaar, former deputy head of Israeli National Security Council, and Ben-Dor Yamini, a senior columnist with the Yediot Ahronot newspaper. Thank you very much both for coming. It's a tough day here in Israel, but it's been like that for months. Itamar, what is the strategy at this point in Gaza?
It's a good question. First of all, I would admit I don't know. It's not clear. What I hope is that somebody have the answer for it. I'm not sure. I think that as we see it, and I don't have any information that is not public, the Prime Minister is trying to achieve full victory. And he believes that everything that will be less than it will be the end of his career. Now, obviously, most of us, if not all of us, understand that full victory in this kind of circumstances is not achievable. Not because the IDF is not strong, but because we used to be part of a full war operations, and now we are dealing with the guerrilla warfare. And for that, you don't need any Hamas organization. You don't need Hamas battalions. You need one or two activists that come out from a tunnel or come out from a destroyed building with some very basic weapon. And his main aim is to kill soldiers. And this is what we see lately. And this is the reason why Israel need to go and to achieve some kind of agreement that will allow a regional force or something similar to it to go into Gaza and to try to control Gaza instead of the IDF try to hold all these elements together.
Ben-Dror, we still have more questions than answers.
Yes, we do. We do. I guess that some of the answers were supplied by Yahya Sinwar himself. Some documents that were linked to the Wall Street Journal just a few days ago. His messages to the delegation, to the Hamas leaders. And he's saying, actually, no, it's great what is going on right now. I don't mind about there's so many Palestinians that are killed. What I do care about that Israel actually is trapped. And we see what is happening. I mean, every week we have something new, another blow to Israel. It can be from the ICC, it can be from the ICJ, it can be from France with the arm exhibition. I mean, every week, sometimes every day, we have a kind of failure to Israel. So he doesn't want to stop it. He wanted to continue. And we see the huge wave of anti-Zionism, the huge wave of anti-Semitism. He wants it to continue. He doesn't want to stop it. He sees what's happening in the north. Great. He sees what's happening to Israel internationally. Great.
You're talking about Sinwar.
Yeah. I'm talking about Sinwar. So for him, he doesn't have any interest. I mean, strategically, he doesn't have any interest to stop this ongoing war.
There are growing voices in Israel that say, okay, they want to end the war, let's end the war and get the people back. But there's no willingness from Netanyahu, let's put it this way.
Let me tell you, I'm saying it from the first week. What we had to do, actually, is a kind of declare ceasefire. I'm speaking about the first week. Why? Not because I think that the Hamas will say yes, but we could say the Hamas, you have to release all the hostages and to obey the international proposals that were given in the last 20 years, meaning this arm all the Gaza Strip, no more terror, and no more siege, no more blockade. They refused again and again. So what I said at the first week, and I repeated it again and again, let's declare one-sided ceasefire, unilateral ceasefire. Let him say the no. You know what? I know that he's going to say, the Hamas will say no. But it's a win-win situation for Israel. It has never been done, and we continued and continued, and we are where we are now.
Itamar, is this a way to put the ball in the enemy's court? To say, okay, we'll end the war, now give us the people?
My answer is yes. What we saw lately is some kind of answers from Israel that is very close or very similar to that. Israel said lately that they agree to the American proposals. Those that said no are the Hamas. They said no, and when I say they, it's Sinwar, because he assumed, as was said just now, that the time is working for him and not for Israel. And then you go and you ask yourself, who are the players that can push Hamas to agree to this some kind of international proposal? And the only ones that can do it is Qatar and nobody else. In a way, it was Egypt, but now we control the Philadelphia line. So Egypt is out of the question. It's Qatar. Will Qatar do it? It's a question. The Americans need to push Qatar. Qatar need to push Sinwar. To be very frank, I'm not so sure that even when this will happen, Sinwar will agree to anything, because historically, Sinwar think that he will die one day, and he would like to
die as a shaheed.
As a martyr.
As a martyr.
Yeah. Okay, meanwhile, Gadi Eisenkot, former IDF chief of staff who resigned from the war cabinet, delivers an astonishing account of how Prime Minister Netanyahu deceived him and his partner Benny Gantz on key strategic issues such as the hostage negotiations and the Rafah operation. Senior correspondent Bianca Zanini reports.
Pressure is mounting on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to reach a deal to end, or at least pause, the fighting in Gaza. From the streets to the halls of parliament, frustration is growing as a ceasefire for hostages deal with Hamas seems as out of reach as ever.
I think the deal that we have on the table right now, Israel should take it. It's a part of being Israeli, is the notion of we're not leaving anyone behind.
One of the voices calling to reach a deal is former hostage Andrei Kozlov, who was rescued just last week in a major IDF operation in Gaza.
Hello, I'm Andrei Kozlov, and I'm already in Israel, at home, but a lot of hostages are still there, in Gaza. I saw a lot of rallies on Saturday, and it gave me a lot of hope. I ask you to come and support families and hostages to Kikar HaTufim in this Saturday.
This Saturday's protests came at the backdrop of an IDF announcement that 8 soldiers were killed in an explosion in Rafah, Gaza.
Israeli citizens, today we paid another heartbreaking price in our just war for the defense of the homeland. In deep sorrow, in heavy mourning, I bow my head together with all citizens of Israel and mourn the fall of our heroic warriors.
The news only fueled the weekly protests. Organizers announced a week of demonstrations aiming to get 1 million people onto the streets and calling for early elections and a hostage deal.
The fact that 8 soldiers get killed today just emphasizes the fact that we need a change. We need a change that will start from the government and down to change the situation, to release the hostages as soon as possible, and just to change the reality. We can't live in this reality for a long time. If today 8 soldiers killed, more will get killed the next day and the day afterward. And the only way to make a change is just to protest and bring the government down.
Benjamin Netanyahu is being accused of dragging out the war for his own political interests. Former war cabinet observer Gadi Eisenkot from the opposition National Unity Party came out criticizing the premier, saying he's letting National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, a controversial far-right figure in the government, have way too much influence in decisions. And another pressure point is the government's recent decision to revive a bill that, in theory, aims to increase the number of ultra-Orthodox soldiers drafted to the army. Many of them are exempt from service, but which de facto pushes any actual changes far off into the future, ensuring the coalition's survival for now and angering many Israelis. For now, the protests continue.
Back to the studio. I'm sure, Ben-Dror, you've seen Gadi Eisenkot saying that Netanyahu deceived himself and Gantz on the issues of hostages, Rafah, and so on. He is a reliable person, obviously, former chief of staff. How could that happen?
How can it happen? We are in the middle of process of actually dragging on and on and on the war. I mean, we do know that after 8 months, Netanyahu is not willing to end it, because the meaning of ending this war will be new election, and he doesn't want a new election. And that's why it's happening. Now, is he serving his political interest and actually against the national interest? So many of us are afraid that this is a situation. I mean, if you see even the polls, you don't need me. If you see the polls, too many Israelis think that actually he is not doing what is the best for the country. He is not doing what is the best for the international national interest. What he's doing right now is just good for himself. He thinks that it's good for himself. By the way, I don't think that it's good, even not for himself. Be honest, be fair, do what we need. Believe me, many more people will support you. But he is not doing it. I'm not his advisor. I guess it is his advisors, and we know who they are, giving him the worst advices, unfortunately.
You know, I met one of the senior ambassadors in Israel last week, and he asked me who are the people that Netanyahu listened to? And my answer was, he doesn't listen. Because he believed on two basic elements. First of all, he believed that once he will not be the Israeli prime minister, Israel will not exist. And he said it in closed doors to more than one person. Secondly, he believed that after 15 years as a prime minister, nobody can teach him anything. And because of that, he doesn't listen to anybody, even to the people that he used to listen to now. So I'm not surprised that Eisenkot and Gantz and others thought that they are partners and they need to be part of the picture and the discussion, and they realize that they were not there. So it's not a surprise.
For the first time in this panel, I disagree with you. I'll tell you why I disagree with you. I disagree with you because he's changing his mind. I mean, we all read that in the first 2, 3, 4 months, somebody was sitting in the next room to the cabinet, namely his wife. And when decisions were decided, actually he went out to take the advice of his family, of his wife, and he changed his mind. So it happened many times, by the way. It happened many times, and when you speak with the heads of the security services, they are telling you, we just disconnected our phone after something was agreed upon. Why? Because we knew that in 10 minutes he's going to call and to change his mind. So
after all, we agree, because when I
if we agree, it's okay.
When I used to say Netanyahu, I meant Netanyahu and his wife and child.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the protest movement demanding elections is set to drive up demonstrations throughout Israel this week. I-24 News' Emily Francis is live in Tel Aviv with the latest. Emily.
Hey, good evening. Obviously, all hopes right now are kind of put on the side right now with the latest hostage deal being rejected, of course, by Hamas, with Egypt still pressuring Hamas to at least make good on the first phase of the deal that was presented by President Biden. But here in Hostage Square last night, tens of thousands of people were here at the behest of released hostage Andrei Kozlov, who was sharing just his experience and sharing the fact that almost every weekend while they were in captivity, they were seeing all the protests and the rallies, which gave them a sense of hope and a sense of purpose. So with that said, all of the heart and the soul of the people coming here has at least brought some kind of solace to the hostages living in complete hell. Now, let me get into out of the frame a second. You can see people coming here, a group of young people, young dancers that have been rehearsing for the past couple of hours. We could take a look and a little listen. So, as you can see, obviously, people still coming here, both tourists and locals alike. It's their way of feeling like they're a part of this experience and giving as much energy as possible, not only to Israelis at large, but also to the hostages, in hopes that they are able to watch and see how much love is coming from here to them.
Emily, thank you very much. Back to the studio here. Ben-Dror, given everything you said before, and the polls and the demonstrations which will take off this week even more, can Netanyahu take Israel to another war?
Actually, it's going on. It might happen also in the north. I mean, we hear so many people saying, no, we don't want double war, we don't want two fronts. But it doesn't mean that that's exactly what is going to happen, because we see what is happening in the north. Today, it's a kind of fast for the Muslims. That's why today it's the first day after many months that actually we did not have rockets from the Hezbollah. But not yet. But tomorrow probably it will continue. And will it develop? Will it happen? Yeah, it might happen. We don't want it to happen. Many of us think that there is a political solution. Now we have to bear in mind. We have to bear in mind that the main enemy was and still Iran. This is the head of the snake. And we are dealing with something which is important, but not the most important. We are actually tiring ourselves with this kind of war against Hamas, which is not a real war. But the main enemy was and is Iran. And we could have a package deal, mega deal, between the United States and Saudi Arabia and Israel in order to create a front against Iran, a regional front. Unfortunately, even to that it is not going. Why? Because Israel will be asked to say something like a political vision for the Palestinians. Why don't you say it? You said it so many times in the past. But here, again, we fail ourselves instead of to create this front, we are dealing with what? With the Hamas.
Okay. Itamar, at this point, when Israel is so polarized internally, can it start a new war in the north?
Technically, yes. Once we will have to have real fight in Lebanon, the Israeli reservists will come and do the job. But it's only technically. Socially, I think that the deep line between different elements within the Israeli society will become much, much deeper. And this is a real risk. Now, when we watch the Iranian strategy, the Iranians are not really interested on the IDF. They're interested on the Israeli society. And for them, what they see now is a huge success. It's not a joke when people are saying, when the intelligence senior people came to Netanyahu before October 7th and said to him, look, forget about what is right and what is wrong. As we see how our enemies see what is happening in Israel, we are in risk. And there is a risk that they will try to open a war against us. At that time, they thought about the north and not about Hamas, but it doesn't matter. Now, I think that we need to remember, following what Ben-Dror have said, the real coordinator of everything that is happening is Iran. Iran is the enemy. All the others are players that play with and together with Iran. For Iran, a war in Lebanon is a disaster, because for Iran, Lebanon is something absolutely different from Gaza. They can lose Gaza, they can lose Hamas, because the job of Hamas and in Gaza is to disturb Israel, not more than it. Lebanon is something else. Lebanon is part of the line that starts in Iran, going to Iraq, going to Syria, Lebanon, the Mediterranean, and from the Mediterranean to the rest of the...
Yemen too.
And Yemen, of course. Yeah. And they don't want to lose it only because Sinwar decided to blow everything. So the Iranians have an interest not to go to full war. And when you watch what they are doing, they do things that they assume that will not bring Israel to a full war. But after we said all these things, we need to remember it's risk management. And in 1 minute, the whole picture can be different.
Yeah, and escalate. Which brings us to this. Iran and Iraq may open a media office for Hamas in Baghdad. But there's, of course, much more than PR to this cooperation. With us now is Intifat Kanbar, President and founder of Kurdish Protection Action Committee. Thank you very much for joining us again.
Thank you, Jacob. I can talk about this issue hours, how Iraq is becoming increasingly a place for Iranian Revolutionary Guard activities, and Iraqi budget increasingly becoming like the checkbook for Khamenei. They paying off Hamas, they paying off Hezbollah. The second man in Hezbollah, Sheikh Mohammed Kawtharani, almost residing in Baghdad, pumping money to Hezbollah Lebanon, which is used to launch missiles on Israel and in the region. Moreover, this Hamas move is a very dangerous move. I just give you one more example. Last year in April 14th, there was a visit from the head of terrorist Islamic Jihad, Ziad Nakhala, to Baghdad. He met with the Prime Minister and the President of Iraq on a Friday, which is a holiday in Iraq, and met first, before meeting any Iraqi official, met with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Ambassador al-Sadiq, followed by a call from Secretary of State Blinken to the Prime Minister of Iraq while he was there, or probably just left Baghdad. And the Blinken never brought it up with the Prime Minister of Iraq. And it shows you that the United States policy on Iraq is completely confusing. While they put Mohammed Kawtharani, the second person of Hezbollah, on $10 million award, he is in Iraq, and the Iraqi government is funding him, and the Iraqi government putting a line item funding the Shia militias $3 billion overtly, while they are claiming they are the allies of the United States. So I think Israel is able to handle those militias in Syria. Unfortunately, Iraq is out of the reach of Israel, and the United States should deal with this issue and should stop this farce of considering the fantasy of Iraq as an ally of the United States.
In what ways can the United States fight this? Because it looks like Iraq is on the path of becoming a full proxy of Iran.
Exactly. I mean, the United States should treat it this way. The United States should not allow U.S. dollar to flow to Iraq. Iraqi oil revenue comes to the to the U.S. Federal Reserve. The United States should impose sanctions. The United States should use methods of eliminating those terrorists, like what President Donald Trump did and eliminated Qasem Soleimani in Iraq and Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, two notorious terrorists. Receiving the Prime Minister of Iraq in Washington, believe it or not, accompanying him were people who are supporters of the militias who vowed to kill Americans on TV. They joined him to Washington. So this fantasy world that Iraq is an ally of the United States is risking the region. In fact, now Iraq hosting the Houthis, hosting even Bahraini terrorists, hosting the PKK, or pumping money to the PKK, another terrorist organization, Hamas. And there's one more thing which is quite significant. It's interesting, right, that my sources told me that Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas, refused to move to Iraq because I think the deal is more than opening public relations. Qatar, I heard, wants to get rid of Ismail Haniyeh, and Hamas leadership refused to come to Iraq because they know that the Shia militias hate the Sunnis, and they are treating the Sunnis in Iraq, sorry to say, like a trash. So
we'll leave it at that, Intifad, because we have to go to a break. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back after this short break with more news. Stay tuned.
story must reach the whole world. The I-24 News Channel, broadcasting from Israel, with dozens of correspondents throughout the world, brings the truth from Israel to hundreds of millions of people in scores of countries.
Completely gunned down in their beds.
De la frontière qui sépare Israël.
The state of emergency and war in Israel.
Bringing Israel's story to the world. I-24 News Channels. Now on Hot.
Welcome back. New diplomatic efforts by the United States to prevent an escalation between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. I-24 News' Ariel Osram reports.
With tensions on the Israel-Lebanon border at their highest level in 18 years, the United States is on a diplomatic offensive to try and prevent a full-scale war. Senior U.S. official Amos Hochstein will travel to Israel and to Lebanon on Monday in search of a diplomatic solution. And at least according to a recent interview, Hochstein seems hopeful.
I'm not expecting peace, everlasting peace between Hezbollah and Israel. I don't think that's on the table. But if we can reach a set of understandings and take away some of the impetus for conflict and establish for the first time ever, a recognized border between the two, I think that will go a long way, and I believe it is entirely possible to do that. I truly do.
Hochstein's visit comes as Hezbollah further intensifies its rocket barrages and the IDF striking deeper in Lebanon against the Iranian-backed group. But it's not only Washington that's concerned over the cross-border escalation. The two top UN officials in Lebanon issued a warning, voicing their deep concern over the situation. The danger of miscalculation leading to a sudden and wider conflict is very real, and we continue to engage with the parties and urge all actors to cease their fire and commit to working toward a political and diplomatic solution, which is the only lasting solution. Meanwhile, following last week's elimination of its most senior commander since the start of the war, Hezbollah vowed to amplify their attacks on northern Israel.
The enemy should know that in our definitive and unhesitating answer, after the martyrdom of Abu Talib, we will increase attacks in intensity, force, quantity and quality, and let it wait for us in the field.
But behind closed doors, at least according to reports, Hezbollah is playing a different tune. According to a Lebanese report, a senior Hezbollah official says the chance of an all-out war with Israel is still far away at this stage, and that Hezbollah's forceful response to the elimination was not intended to lead to an all-out war. Add to that a report in the London-based Sharq al-Awsat in which Hezbollah advised Hamas to agree to the American ceasefire proposal for Gaza. Both moves signal Hezbollah's reluctance to war, but their actions so far are telling a different story.
Now let's go live to I-24 News' Balir Sladin in northern Israel with a report from there. Balir.
Yes, it has been strangely quiet since this morning, or actually even since yesterday afternoon. That was the last time Hezbollah announced any attacks against Israeli targets. Just a few minutes ago, some Lebanese reports talked about firing rockets toward Metula, but we still have no confirmation and no reports from the Israeli side about this. Maybe in the coming few minutes, but of course there was no siren as we see it. And then from the other side, Israeli airstrikes are limited as well today. Also, the artillery that has been also targeted some of the towns in southern Lebanon are also limited. There has been some reports of strikes to Kufr Kila, Mohabib, some towns that are very close to the border, and this is happening at the first day of Eid al-Adha, the holiday that many Muslims in southern Lebanon, of course, celebrate. And there has been some sources in Lebanon saying that there is some sort of unofficial truce between Israel and Hezbollah, and it's because of the holiday, maybe not to give give the Israelis, as they are saying, any excuse to operate in southern Lebanon or strike southern Lebanon during the Eid, during the holiday, which lasts until this Wednesday. And then also the efforts are continuing. Tomorrow we are expecting Amos Hochstein, the U.S. envoy to the region. He's going to arrive to Tel Aviv to meet with Israeli officials. And then on Tuesday, according to a Lebanese newspaper, he is going to arrive to Beirut to meet with his with the officials from Lebanon, including the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Najib Mikati. And the background of this visit also reports talking about the meeting that the U.S. ambassador to Lebanon has held with the Foreign Minister of Lebanon, Abu Habib, and she expressed the concerns that the U.S. has in terms of Israel opening a new front here, opening a new war here, and escalate the situation because of Hezbollah's actions. Abu Habib has said that these concerns were very harsh from the U.S. and very serious. We should expect that the efforts will be ongoing this week to de-escalate the situation, or at least not escalate the situation to a full-blown war here in this front, which is the main goal of the U.S. that has been working on since the beginning of those hostilities on October 8th.
Right. Okay, Valir, thank you very much for this report. Back to the studio here with me are Itamar Yar, former deputy head of Israeli National Security Council, and Ben-Dror Yamini, senior columnist for Yediot Ahronot newspaper. Itamar, what is the danger of escalation over there in the north?
There is a risk, but I think that the players play a game that, at least how they see it, will not open a full war. And they try to limit what we see. And it's some kind of a game, if I can use this word. Everybody is trying to show that he's doing his best to limit it and to make sure that it will not explode to a full war.
Ben-Dror, it's a pretty darn war for two sides. They don't want war, as they always say.
Look, many times what we do is to ignore what the Arab leaders are saying. Now, 2 days after Biden declared the Israeli plan for the hostages, 2 days after there was a speech of Ali Khamenei, the leader of Iran. And he said, no, we are not going to accept it. Nobody wanted to listen to what he said. In that very day, the foreign minister, the acting foreign minister of Iran, was in Beirut. And he said the same. No, we are going to refuse. We are going to say no. Now, we don't listen to them. We have to listen to them. We have to listen to what they say. Now, we think many times in a very rational way. And the meaning is, no, nobody wants a war, as you just said. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that because they have their own logic. When Yahya Sinwar initiated the October 7 attack, he knew that the Gaza Strip is going to be to turn to be rebels and there will be a huge destruction. And yet he did it. He did it because his logic is not our logic many times. But we have to listen to what they say. And they said, for example, repeatedly, they said, we did what we did in order actually to thwart the mega deal between the United States and Saudi Arabia and Israel. Listen to what they say. Just listen to what they say. They know exactly what they're saying. Many times we think that they manipulate us. No, they do not manipulate us. They say exactly what they want. That's why I'm afraid that there might be war, even if the result will be a huge destruction in Lebanon. They don't care. I mean, we think, oh, they are deterred because of the huge destruction that is going to be carried out. No, it's not what they think. And we have always to bear in mind that they have their own way of thinking.
Yeah, sometimes what they say, it's what they mean.
Many times, many times.
Itamar, we've been seeing an escalation, a slow one, right, almost daily. What are the risks of some sort of miscalculation and just big all-out war breaking?
there is a risk. But again, it's based on decision-making process. I don't think that in the Israeli system now, even Netanyahu is going to declare war on Lebanon in this kind of circumstances. He's not stupid. He understands the difficulties. He understands not only that Israel needs the U.S. and not only the U.S. To be with us in this kind of operation. And he understands also that the IDF is not on the highest level of readiness for a full war in Lebanon. What I assume is that he will try, as far as he will need to take the decision, to wait with it. In the long term, I'm sure that the Israeli system, with or without Netanyahu, understand now that one day we need to deal with the real threat of Hezbollah. And in other words, as Ben-Dor have said, the real enemy is Iran. And the biggest question is, do we want to go to war in Lebanon when Iran is waiting there? Or to go to another strategy and to say it's time to deal directly with Iran and not only with Lebanon. This is, I think, what is on the table.
But for Iran, we did this kind of coalition, regional coalition, which will we saw it for one night. We saw it in the night of the rockets from of the missiles from Iran, and we saw that it can work. It can work. Let's go and continue. Unfortunately, Netanyahu is not doing it.
I'm afraid to say that I'm not so sure that Netanyahu took the right meaning of what we saw on that evening. Because you may think that he may think that with or without diplomatic agreement, signature and all that, we already saw that there is a coalition that is working, with or without any Israeli price for it. And he might think that we already are there. And it's wrong, because the players work with us because they understood that we were attacked. Once we are those that attack, even if we have a good excuse for it, the picture is different. And this is the message that the Americans and the others are sending to Netanyahu. Don't rely on us if you will go for it independently.
Let's move to this. Sometimes you have to do difficult things, says Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson, after a deal with Iran, in which an Iranian man convicted over mass executions was exchanged for 2 Swedes. Yulia Podglayova reports.
Sweden and Iran carried out a controversial prisoner exchange on Saturday. Stockholm released former Iranian official Hamid Nouri, arrested in 2019 and sentenced to life in prison for war crimes related to the mass execution and torture of political prisoners in Iran in 1988. Rights groups estimate that as many as 5,000 people were executed. Iran rolled out the red carpet for Nouri when he arrived back in Tehran.
I am Hamid Nouri. I am in Iran. God made me free.
In return, Iran released Swedish diplomat Johan Floderis and dual Swedish-Iranian national Saeed Azizi. The Swedish prime minister accused the Islamic regime of illegal hostage-taking to achieve its political goals.
Iran used them both as pawns in a cynical negotiation game with the purpose of getting the Iranian citizen Hamid Nouri released from prison in Sweden.
Johan Floderis was arrested in Iran in 2022 and charged with spying for Israel and, quote, corruption on earth, a crime punishable by death. Saeed Azizi was arrested in 2023 on charges of, quote, assembly and collusion against national security, and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Iranian opposition figures abroad criticized Sweden for yielding to Tehran's blackmail and hostage-taking tactics. Media outlet Iran International estimated that Sweden's decision could encourage more kidnappings and unlawful detentions. This development could embolden not only Iran, but also other regimes and organizations, demonstrating that democratic nations could be coerced into compromising their principles and judicial decisions. A tactic that was seemingly adopted by Palestinian terror groups Hamas and Islamic Jihad, who are still holding 120 Israeli hostages in Gaza. Meanwhile, another Swedish-Iranian dual national, Ahmad Reza Jalali, remains imprisoned in Iran. He was arrested in 2016 when visiting Tehran to participate in a medical workshop and accused of spying for Israel. Iran refuses to recognize his Swedish nationality, but the fact that Jalali's death sentence has not been carried out for 7 years indicates he could be treated by Iran as another pawn in its hostage diplomacy.
More on that with Iran expert Arash Azizi. Thank you very much for joining us. Who are we talking about in this exchange? The Hamid Nouri. What can you tell us about him?
He was a rather lowly official, but that still played an important and criminal role. He was an official in the Gohardash prison during the 1988 massacre, in which at least 5,000 Iranian political prisoners were effectively extrajudicially executed. I mean, a lot of them had already served their terms. A lot of them were very young. A lot of them had maybe 5-year prison terms, and only a few months was remaining out of them. And a few people, there were a few big people in charge of this. Ebrahim Raisi, the Iranian president, who just died in a helicopter crash a couple of weeks ago, he was one. Mustafa Pur Mohammadi, another guy who is running now for president in Iran, was another one. He was one of the top 4 officials. The Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khomeini, of course, had ordered the whole thing. But Nouri was in charge of, in a prison, a Gohardash prison. He was some sort of a prosecutor there, basically. And he also had a role helping Maurice, one of the judges, to bring it about. And in 2021, I think, yes, in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, when he was visiting Sweden, perhaps slightly before that, he was arrested after the maybe 2021 when he was sentenced. Sorry, he was arrested before that by the work of Iranian justice movement, really opposition and justice movement, who saw that he knew that he had a role in crimes against humanity and used the principle of universal jurisdiction to have Sweden arrest him and give him a life sentence.
So the Iranian system works. We've seen this before. They arrest a couple of foreigners on some vague charges, and then they get exchanged like this. It works.
Unfortunately, this is really true. The Iranian regime has a policy of hostage-taking. It's very open now that it's hostage-taking. It doesn't deny it anymore. If you look at the official state sort of outlets in Iran, very openly speak about the fact that this worked, that they lock up a couple of citizens. They'll find they don't even really need a reason, and they'll use it to negotiate. By the way, they've used it to negotiate for not just release of prisoners. They've used it to negotiate for securing the receipt of debt. For example, they got more than $500 million from Britain, which Britain did owe Iran in some sort of a deal, but that they used the imprisonment of a young Iranian woman, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, for more than 6 years. She was away from her children and her family just so Iran could use her. So what we really need is an international campaign, as many people have called for. People like Jason Rezaian, an Iranian-American journalist who was effectively a hostage in Iran for many years until he was released as part of sort of dealing during the Obama administration. And many others have called for an international coordinated effort to counter this official hostage-taking policy that Iran follows.
Now, the G7 has just come out against the Iran nuclear program and missiles for Russia as well. Do you expect more than words there?
Well, the Iranian nuclear saga is a long one. The G7 drew a red line on the issue of Iran giving ballistic missiles to Russia. I think that might have some effect. It's already Iran's decision to arm Russia is very controversial, and frankly, even inside the Iranian establishment, because it sort of goes against the traditional Iranian policy of non-alignment in regional wars. Even the Islamic Republic didn't used to take such sides, really, if you look at previous examples. So for them to brazenly back Russia against Ukraine is really a departure from precedent. And so the G7 red line about giving ballistic missiles to Russia might just about work. Now, as for the nuclear issue, look, the reality, I've written about this, recently, the reality that one has to confront is that the Islamic Republic, the Iran regime, has changed its nuclear doctrine. It not only openly speaks about the possibility of it acquiring a nuclear weapon. Now, I don't think they are going to go for that. I think they would prefer what you call the Japan option, i.e., having a nuclear threshold option, having everything ready, without going that extra mile that could lead to unpredictable, consequences. But it very much is, if you're a long way from a time like 2015, in which Iran's official policy, declared policy, was that it was going to negotiate and bring down its nuclear program. And it has a very advanced nuclear program now. It's only steps away from weaponization.
All right, Arash Azizi, thank you very much. A quick comment here in the studio, Ben Dror. This is the elephant in the room, nuclear Iran.
This is the elephant in the room. We have to bear in mind, I saw so many people when I was lately in the United States demonstrating actually in favor of who? In favor of Hamas, in favor of the Houthis, in favor of Hezbollah, and you see them waving with the flags of the three. Which is unbelievable. Which is unbelievable because, are you so stupid? I'm asking, and I ask, by the way, the demonstrators. What are you doing? They are against capitalism. They are against imperialism. I said, what? What? There was a kind of debate, and just one thing we have to bear in mind: wherever you have the jihad, Shiites or Sunni, wherever you have it, this kind of radical Islam, there is bloodshed, there is destruction, nothing to do with Israel. People say, there is a kind of confrontation between Israel and the Hamas. No. Look what is going on in the Sahel. Nobody wants to see. Look what's going on right now in Sudan. Look what happened what's happening in Lebanon, which is actually a pariah state, failed country,
and so point, I'm going to move to Itamar. This is an international threat in nuclear Iran, right? And the world should do something about it, which we don't see much so far.
Interesting enough, lately you see the European countries have a policy that is even more aggressive than the American ones. Each one of them have different reasons for it. It's clear today, and thank Hamas for it, that the European countries realized lately that the jihad, the Islamic fundamental jihad, is not against Israel only, and they might see it on their streets, and they saw some signs of it.
They saw.
They saw it lately, and some of them change or start to change part of their policies dealing with these kind of threats.
Thank you very much, both of you. Let's talk about this. The US-led campaign against the Houthis has turned into the most intense running sea battle the Navy has faced since World War II, no less. For more, we are joined by Clifford May, the founder and president of Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you very much.
Good to be with you.
How come this has become so intense, by the way? First since World War II.
Well, it's an interesting thing. For years, we have been hearing that Yemen is one of the great humanitarian catastrophes in the world, that the people of Yemen are in need of food and medicine. Oddly enough, they do not lack for missiles, for drones, or for radar. How is that possible? Well, we know how that's possible. It's because the Islamic Republic of Iran is providing all of that. Donor community can do food, but they can do the missiles. And the U.S. is fighting a purely defensive war. They're trying to stop the missiles from hitting commercial ships in the Red Sea corridor. That's insufficient. This is something that the U.S. doesn't appear to realize, and too many in the West don't, that you don't win wars on defense only. And part of the problem is that that's what the U.S. and other Western countries too often try to force on others, on Israel, for example, on Ukraine, for example. You must be on offense if you are to win a war. You cannot simply continue to shoot down the missiles that are aiming to kill you. That is going to be insufficient, and it is here. And so you have the U.S. fighting against a non-state actor, Houthi rebels, because they refuse to put in place a strategy that would actually defeat the Houthis, or more importantly, that would either defeat or deter the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Houthis being a proxy, a foreign legion of the Islamic Republic of Iran, as is Hezbollah, as is Hamas, as is Islamic Jihad, as are the various Shia militias in Syria and Iraq. Those are the facts that too many people refuse to recognize.
Yeah. We do hear, though, that the U.S. has struck radar systems throughout Yemen there, which may imply a beginning of something which is less defensive and more active?
Look, it's good to knock out those radar systems because they're being used to target these commercial ships. But if you don't take further steps, why would the Islamic Republic of Iran not purchase and deliver more radar systems? They certainly can do that. And the Islamic Republic of Iran has a lot of money that it didn't have because over the past few years, since the Biden administration, many sanctions have been lifted, and the Islamic Republic is selling its oil, is at least $40 billion richer than it was at the beginning of the Biden administration. The Trump administration did have fairly strong economic sanctions that was doing some damage to the Iranian economy. So it is good to knock out their radar systems, but now you have to think, how do we prevent those radar systems from being replaced? And that requires more aggressive action, I would argue, not just against the Houthis, but against the Houthis' sponsors, and they are in Tehran.
Right. So we said this here before, that's the source, but nobody's going after the source seriously.
Well, that's precisely the case. Almost all of the terrible things that are happening in the Middle East, what's happening to the Palestinians in Gaza, what's happened to the Syrians, something like 500,000 dead. The Islamic Republic of Iran is behind all of this. And I'm not the first to say, I think various Israeli commentators perhaps and politicians, I think Naftali Bennett may get credit, is you don't win in this kind of battle by going only after the tentacles of the octopus. You have to go after the head, and the head of the octopus sleeps soundly in Tehran every night.
Clifford May, that's a good point to say goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And this is it for us. Stay tuned for more news with Kalev Ben David here on I-24 News. Have a good night from Tel Aviv.
A new voice is about to be heard.
אתם צופים בערוץ החדשות I-24 News.
I-24 News launches its fourth channel in Hebrew, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
ותיעדו את הטבח.
I-24 News in Hebrew brings its international success for the past 10 years to Israel. Real-time news, sharp analyses, and passionate debates on the burning issues shaping Israeli society and the entire Middle East. And for you, English-speaking viewers, I-24 News offers a unique, immersive experience. Every day until 11 a.m. EST, Hebrew programs will be broadcast live with English subtitles. And from 11 a.m. EST, back to your favorite shows in English. More than ever, the heart of a new Middle East beats on I-24 News.
Tel Aviv is ranked the happiest city in the world and the best place to own a home. For 3 generations, the Ben Shalom family has built boutique apartment buildings in the most desirable locations. From restoration in historical locales to homes along Park Hayarkon, Ben Shalom is a one-stop shop from start to finish and friends for life.
Okay, go. Go.
Welcome to this special broadcast on I-24 News. I'm Kalev Ben-David. It is day 254 of Israel at war, and in stark contrast to last weekend's jubilation over the rescue of 4 hostages from Gaza, this weekend is highlighting the high cost of the battle against Hamas. The IDF today announcing the deaths of 2 reservists, Captain Eitan Koplovich, 28, and Warrant Officer Elon Weiss, 49, killed in northern Gaza when an explosive device blasted against their tank. IDF also announcing the passing of Sergeant Yair Rotman, 19, from wounds suffered last week in Rafah. Following yesterday's announcement of 8 combat fatalities in Rafah, that brings the number of soldiers killed in the Gaza operation to 310, according to the IDF. Together with the intensifying fire from Hezbollah into northern Israel, the failure to advance the latest proposal for a hostage release for ceasefire deal, and the government's handling of the dispute over draft exemptions for ultra-Orthodox Jews, frustration with the costs of the war is growing among much of the Israeli public, posing a mounting political challenge for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. More in this report from senior correspondent Bianca Zanini.
Pressure is mounting on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to reach a deal to end, or at least pause, the fighting in Gaza. From the streets to the halls of parliament, frustration is growing as a ceasefire for hostages deal with Hamas seems as out of reach as ever.
I think the deal that we have on the table right now, Israel should take it. It's a part of being Israeli, is the notion of we're not leaving anyone behind.
One of the voices calling to reach a deal is former hostage Andrei Kozlov, who was rescued just last week in a major IDF operation in Gaza.
Hello, I'm Andrei Kozlov, and I'm already in Israel, at home. But a lot of hostages are still there, in Gaza. I saw a lot of rallies on Saturday, and it gave me a lot of hope. I ask you to come and support families and hostages to Kikar HaTufim in this Saturday.
This Saturday's protests came at the backdrop of an IDF announcement that 8 soldiers were killed in an explosion in Rafah, Gaza.
Israeli citizens, today we paid another heartbreaking price in our just war for the defense of the homeland. In deep sorrow, in heavy mourning, I bow my head together with all citizens of Israel and mourn the fall of our heroic warriors.
The news only fueled the weekly protests. Organizers announced a week of demonstrations aiming to get 1 million people onto the streets and calling for early elections and a hostage deal.
The fact that 8 soldiers get killed today just emphasizes the fact that we need a change. We need a change that will start from the government and down to change the situation, to release the hostages as soon as possible, and just to change the reality. We can't live in this reality for a long time. If today 8 soldiers killed, more will get killed the next day and the day afterward. And the only way to make a change is just to protest and bring the government down.
Benjamin Netanyahu is being accused of dragging out the war for his own political interests. Former War Cabinet observer Gadi Eisenkot from the opposition National Unity Party came out criticizing the premier, saying he's letting National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, a controversial far-right figure in the government, have way too much influence in decisions. And another pressure point is the government's recent decision to revive a bill that, in theory, aims to increase the number of ultra-Orthodox soldiers drafted to the army. Many of them are exempt from service, but which de facto pushes any actual changes far off into the future, ensuring the coalition's survival for now and angering many Israelis. For now, the protests continue.
And for more, let's go to our correspondent, Zach Anders, who was by the Israel-Gaza border down south near Sderot. And Zach, a tough weekend this is down there for all of Israel in that battle for Gaza. And just yesterday's that one incident, 8 killed, the single worst incident in 6 months for Israel, for the IDF there in Gaza.
Yeah, that's right. And the details surrounding what had taken place yesterday were under military censorship for quite some time. Even though this happened at 5 in the morning, we didn't learn about it until later in the afternoon. There was word that there was some sort of event that had taken place in Rafah. And then these details start to come out that the IDF at this point today believes possibly it was a remotely detonated roadside explosive. They have not ruled out that it could have been rocket fire that hit this vehicle. It's also unclear how many vehicles were in a convoy that they were driving together down one of these roads in the eastern neighborhood, the Tal al-Sultan neighborhood of Rafah, in this western area of Rafah. And it's here where this explosion took place, killing the 8 inside this APC, the armored personnel carrier. And it is believed at this hour, from what I've been told by the IDF, that everyone that was in that vehicle was killed in the blast. A very deadly event here, but that wasn't the only fatal event that took place yesterday. In the North Gaza Strip, a few hours after this, there was an explosion on a tank that killed 2 soldiers inside the tank, seriously wounded another 2 soldiers in that same tank. What's interesting there is the IDF is describing this as an explosive that was affixed to the side of the tank, or at least that's the language that's been coming out from the IDF today. It's not really clear, and some of the questions we've had into have not received responses yet about what that looked like. Now, we've seen a lot of videos over the course of this conflict of Hamas posting their own body camera video or their helmet camera video running up to these tanks and attempting to plant devices onto them. So we'll certainly continue to look into this, but you're right, a very devastating day.
Right, and speaking of lack of clarity, the IDF this morning announcing this new corridor for humanitarian aid going into southern Gaza from the Keren Shalom crossing, saying that there is going to be this pause of military activity every day for some 11 hours. And then apparently Prime Minister Netanyahu objecting to it, the army saying, well, it's not actually a tactical pause, there's nothing new here. There seems to be some confusion surrounding this issue.
Yeah, and this is a remarkable element to the different agencies, the different levels of government decision-making that is involved here. COGAT is the one that's trying to facilitate this aid. And from what the conversations I've had with COGAT officials, they need to communicate to the IDF. And, of course, they're a part of the IDF, too. They have involvement, the soldiers and whatnot. They need to communicate what they need and what that looks like. Their efforts to bring trucks into certain areas of the Gaza Strip is well coordinated, has been well coordinated over the course of this conflict with the IDF itself. The IDF, of course, is not going to not communicate to the elements or the bodies within itself of where, this aid is going, and to make sure that none of the soldiers that are involved or tasked with getting aid from point A to point B or approving the aid along those routes, they certainly won't be allowing there to be danger that's taking place along those routes. But you're right, this is going to be a really interesting thing to watch going forward. And it's quite a long stretch of roadway from the Kerem Shalom area all the way into Khan Yunis to the European hospital.
All right, Zach Andes there on the Israel-Gaza border. Thank you for that. Joining us in the studio, we have Ambassador Jeremy Sakharov, the former Israeli ambassador to Germany, former Vice Director General of the Israel Foreign Ministry, and Shiri Fein-Grossman, member of Forum Devora Women in Foreign Policy and National Security, and former head of regional affairs at Israel's National Security Council. And Shiri, you, of course, in an operation like Gaza, you expect casualties, but there's, I think, a little somewhat disturbing that here we have the two incidents in which roadsides, what appears to be roadside IEDs, roadside explosives, piercing armor vehicles of Israel. It's a classic thing when a standing army is faced with a sort of guerrilla warfare, and a lot of concern of people that this could become a pattern for Israel, that it followed so many armies having to deal in these circumstances.
First of all, on a personal note, Eliyahu Tzimbalist is actually a brother of a friend of mine.
Okay.
And I wanted to say from here, and I think we still don't know what happened. I've been following evidence all morning, and they still can't really say if it was an IED like you mentioned, or maybe a malfunction in the explosive that was on it. We still don't know, or an RPG. So there are still I haven't decided what's exactly, and the fact that it's taking so long, it's kind of make us. It was actually the fifth vehicle in the envoy that passed. So it's kind of a weird scenario here that we're trying to investigate, and I think we should give time to fully investigate what happened. But this is a brutal war, and things like that could happen.
Well, clearly it has, and unfortunately a tragic price paid. And condolences, of course. Yesterday, of course, we listed all the names of the soldiers that had fallen. We'll be discussing one of them more in depth later. We also mentioned the frustration among those advocating for moving forward on the hostage deal. We saw very big protests last evening. Let's go to Hostage Square now in our Emily Francis. And Emily, as we've been talking, these casualties over the weekend, just adding to the frustration of those who want to see both a hostage release and think it would be for the better if there would at least be a temporary ceasefire.
100%. Hi, good evening, Kalev and everyone. Yeah, obviously frustrations given obviously the tragedy of what's happened with the IDF soldiers this a week after this heroic rescue. I mean, just to think about the differences in the morale in this country between one Saturday and another Saturday. It's quite quiet here in Hostage Square now. After last night, there were tens of thousands of protesters, obviously very fired up. There were some arrests because things did get a little bit too crowded, I guess, so to speak, in some ways. But, one silver lining's not the right word, but like, as we know, we've been getting testimonies from those that have been released, and from Andrei Kozlov. Of course, we've heard a lot from him when he was encouraging people to go to the protest here last night, but also talking about how they were able in captivity to see the protests every Saturday in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And that really was what kept them going, is to see that the country has not forgotten them, to see that the posters that are everywhere around Israel, and thanking really the support of the community here and around the world for the hostages. But again, no hostage deal. Hamas rejecting a hostage deal. Egypt reportedly trying to put pressure on Hamas to at least accept the first phase of the proposed deal that President Biden talked about. But again, still no solution to the situation.
All right, Emily Francis there at Hostage Square. Thank you for that. Jeremy, I do want to go back to the point about the humanitarian corridor, and it relates also to discussion aroused by Gadi Eisenkot's comments also about decision-making on the hostage deal. The Israeli press, we say, going to town today, as they say, on saying that the confusion about humanitarian, getting humanitarian aid, whether there should be tactical pauses. Some reports saying Prime Minister Netanyahu was influenced by the far-right ministers of in his government, Bezalel Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, to object to this policy. But what one sees is confusion in some degree about some of the decision making, not on the tactical level of the IDF, which is its own problem, but especially when it comes to issues like humanitarian aid and then how to move forward towards some kind of day after structure. It seems there is this confusion at the governmental level.
Absolutely, and as best that I know, there has not been any government decision to decide what the elements of the day after will actually include. But I think that the events of the last few days have shown us that, we have to reassess where we're going in terms of the price that we're paying. We lost over 11 soldiers over the last weekend. We've now lost 307 since the incursion started. And we still haven't released the hostages. And we've been able, by military action, to release 7. And Daniel Hagari just said yesterday that it wouldn't be realistic to assume that we could release all of the hostages, the remaining 120. So we need to have a reassessment of where we're going, what this war is designed to achieve, what are the goals, and I think everyone who's asked to put on an IDF uniform and risk his life should know what the direction we're going in and what do we actually want to achieve. A slogan like an absolute victory doesn't provide us a clear perspective of what we have to achieve and in what time frame.
Right.
And I think that is the key factor right now that must focus our minds.
Well, Shira, you served on the government body that is supposed to at least provide some guidance or some answers, the National Security Council.
I see something that is even more severe. Not only that we don't have a strategy, is that the government is interfering with tactical operational decisions on the ground. We see this both in the IDF. I mean, why would you intervene with an IDF message like that and start saying, no, that's not what we meant? They're actually, intervening with tactical decisions while not making strategic decisions they're supposed to. But also we see in the police also with the demonstrations, we see much hardline from the police in the directive of Ben-Gvir. And I think there's a connecting dot here about interfering with what the operational bodies and civil servants are doing, whether it's IDF, whether it's any other operational body. And that's very worrisome, actually.
All right. Well, clearly the government is going to have to face some hard decisions, including, and we'll discuss also in a little bit, some of the political decisions regarding, for example, IDF recruitment and enlistment. We will get to that. But let's turn our attention now from the south to the northern front. Senior U.S. Middle East envoy Amos Hochstein will travel tomorrow to Israel and Lebanon as Hezbollah is intensifying its rocket barrages and the IDF is striking deeper into Lebanese territory against the terror group. But as our Middle East correspondent Ariel Oseron reports, the visit by Hochstein comes amid signals from Hezbollah that, even as they're stepping up their attacks now on Israel, they have less interest in seeing the conflict escalate into an all-out war.
With tensions on the Israel-Lebanon border at their highest level in 18 years, the United States is on a diplomatic offensive to try and prevent a full-scale war. Senior U.S. official Amos Hochstein will travel to Israel and to Lebanon on Monday in search of a diplomatic solution. And at least according to a recent interview, Hochstein seems hopeful.
I'm not expecting peace, everlasting peace between Hezbollah and Israel. I don't think that's on the table. But if we can reach a set of understandings and take away some of the impetus for conflict and establish for the first time ever, a recognized border between the two, I think that will go a long way. And I believe it is entirely possible to do that. I truly do.
Hochstein's visit comes as Hezbollah further intensifies its rocket barrages and the IDF striking deeper in Lebanon against the Iranian-backed group. But it's not only Washington that's concerned over the cross-border escalation. The two top UN officials in Lebanon issued a warning, voicing their deep concern over the situation. The danger of miscalculation leading to a sudden and wider conflict is very real, and we continue to engage with the parties and urge all actors to cease their fire and commit to working toward a political and diplomatic solution, which is the only lasting solution. Meanwhile, following last week's elimination of its most senior commander since the start of the war, Hezbollah vowed to amplify their attacks on northern Israel.
The enemy should know that in our definitive and unhesitating answer, after the martyrdom of Abu Talib, we will increase attacks in intensity, force, quantity and quality, and let it wait for us in the field.
But behind closed doors, at least according to reports, Hezbollah is playing a different tune. According to a Lebanese report, a senior Hezbollah official says the chance of an all-out war with Israel is still far away at this stage, and that Hezbollah's forceful response to the elimination was not intended to lead to an all-out war. Add to that a report in the London-based Sharq al-Awsat in which Hezbollah advised Hamas to agree to the American ceasefire proposal for Gaza. Both moves signal Hezbollah's reluctance to war, but their actions so far are telling a different story.
Jeremy, I don't think anyone has expectations that Amos Hochstein is going to stop this fire from Hezbollah across the border, which they say they are going to keep up as long as the Gaza conflict is going. But I think the bigger question is whether he's going to be able to come up with some kind of arrangement for the day after the battle in Gaza is over that will give Israel and Israeli citizens in the north the confidence to go back to their homes. Because they're clearly not going to go back under the same circumstances, similar to what we saw was in the Gaza border area on October 7th. And if he can't do that, Israel is going to have to look at some military options to bring about a change in what goes on over the Lebanese border.
Well, I think this issue is connected also to the first issue, and that's why I think that if we stabilize the situation in the south and even stop the war and get our hostages back in the south, I think there's a reasonably good indication that we could pacify the north, and Hezbollah would maybe at least cease their activities. I don't know. There's no guarantees in this. I think that the political, Amos Hochstein is going to have a tremendously complicated mission in trying to get some understandings that could stabilize our border. We need to get our people back to the north, but we need to give them the fullest amount of security possible. But I think that it is possible to move that forward, but we need to also, have a view of the broader picture. And we're in a multi-front war here. And it's not just about Hezbollah, it's not just about Hamas. We also have in the background Iran, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But this, is something that has to fall into sort of a wider strategic concept that Israel has to pursue. And therefore, I think, at this point, we have to try and pursue the option that Amos Hochstein puts on the table, but we have to be prepared for the fact that it doesn't work and that we might have to take extra military measures.
Well, let's go. We're going to go up now to our correspondent, Balir Sladin, who is in northern Israel near the Lebanon border. And we've been discussing that visit by Amos Hochstein to Lebanon, Balir. And, of course, he's looking at the bigger picture, some kind of broader diplomatic solution. But there is always the danger. We're seeing these daily attacks by Hezbollah intensifying, and that if they one strike that would go beyond the current parameters could really dramatically escalate this conflict.
Yes, and exactly that's the concern for the Americans. That's why Amos Hochstein is coming to the region tomorrow. And according to a Lebanese newspaper, he is also going to visit Lebanon on this Tuesday, in order to discuss the possibility of reaching some sort of a de-escalation to the situation. No one ever thinks that there could be peace and even end of the conflict or any solution in this front, but at least de-escalate the situation after what we've seen for the past couple of weeks, all the wildfire here in the north, and also the attacks deep inside Lebanon by the Israeli forces. But it has been strangely quiet today and also yesterday. I have also been here yesterday, and since yesterday afternoon there has been no attacks by Hezbollah. Maybe it's because of the holiday, Eid al-Adha in Lebanon. The Israeli media has been talking about some sort of an unofficial truce between Israel and Hezbollah, but Lebanese sources are saying that it's not the case. What is the case is that Hezbollah doesn't want to give excuses to Israel in order to attack in southern Lebanon, while the people there are celebrating the Eid, the holiday. But in the last couple of hours, there has been attacks on Kufr Kila and Mohabib, as well as in Shakra. So the Israeli airstrikes, although they are limited, but they are continuing in southern Lebanon. But again, There has been no attacks on the northern communities here on any military sites, and maybe this is the situation that is going to continue until Wednesday, until the holiday ends. And during this time, Hochstein will be here, and the efforts to de-escalate the situation will continue. And we just need to mention also conversation between the Foreign Minister of Lebanon and the U.S. ambassador to Lebanon. And the Foreign Minister has said that the conversation or the negotiations were very serious concerns from the Americans in case of any escalation here in the region.
All right, Balir Sladin there in northern Israel. Thank you for that. And Shuri, a holiday break of sorts, maybe for the people of South Lebanon, but not for the Israelis, both Jewish, Arab, and Druze that had to evacuate their homes along the border and are still there. And the question...
There were many rockets on Shavuot, which was a Jewish...
yes, that doesn't seem to apply the other way.
Exactly. Exactly. Look, I mean, we have to be realistic here. There are 13 points that are in dispute for... ever since 2006 on the Blue Line, and even if Amos Hochstein makes the impossible possible, and there is some agreement about the day after in the border with Lebanon, which is completely realistic, do you think Hezbollah would put down their arm and make peace with Israel? No. If the war with Hamas continues, he will continue, like the ambassador said. So the question we really have to ask is what the Americans are going to do now that basically Hamas said no to the proposal. Right. And that's what he said. In the Arabic culture, you don't say no. You said, yes, but I'm going to, take out all the meaning by making some comments. So this is really in the courts of the U.S. I mean, how much it's going to be vigilant on what it stated on the UN Security Council. What are the sticks and not carrots that are on the table for Hamas? And this is the money time to bring it on.
One stick is, of course, the U.S. to really put more pressure on Qatar, for example.
They have to be serious about it.
Yeah, and I think you should be mindful that in Switzerland, actually, over the last couple of days, there was a conference on Ukraine. Right. And Jacob Sullivan was there, and also the Prime Minister of Qatar. So hopefully some discussion could happen there and maybe evolve, but it doesn't. As Shira said, it doesn't look very optimistic.
No, I would say not, considering the optimism even a couple of weeks ago that we had. Ambassador Jerry Misachar, Shiri Fein-Grossman, please stay with us. We are going out for a brief break, but we'll have plenty more on this special broadcast, day 254 of Israel at War. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
A new voice is about to be heard.
אתם צופים בערוץ החדשות i24 News.
i24 News launches its fourth channel in Hebrew, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
ותיעדו את הטבח.
i24 News in Hebrew brings its international success for the past 10 years to Israel. Real-time news, sharp analyses, and passionate debates on the burning issues shaping Israeli society and the entire Middle East. And for you, English-speaking viewers, i24 News offers a unique, immersive experience. Every day until 11 a.m. EST, Hebrew programs will be broadcast live with English subtitles. And from 11 a.m. EST, back to your favorite shows in English. More than ever, the heart of a new Middle East beats on i24 News.
Welcome back to this special broadcast on I-24 News, Israel at War, day 254. Now, as we said, this was a very tough weekend for Israel and the IDF, with 11 soldiers killed as a result of combat in Gaza, 8 in just one explosion of an armored personnel carrier in Rafah. That's actually the single deadliest incident in the Strip in the past 6 months. Now, the senior officer among those killed was Captain Wasim Mahmoud, 29 years old. He was a member of Israel's minority Druze community. He actually returned to the Gaza battlefield after being injured by shrapnel at the very start of the conflict. Now, Mahmoud was one of the many Druze fighters who have been killed in action since October 7th on both the southern and the northern fronts. His hometown of Beit Jan canceled its annual Eid al-Adha feast this weekend to observe his mourning. But there was some anger as well as sorrow expressed by members of his community over what they feel is a sacrifice made by the Druze, not always appreciated or reciprocated by the authorities. Now, among them is Dr. Amir Kanifis, chairman of the Israeli Druze Center, who tweeted, quote, "The pain is enormous, and the worst of it is that this malicious government still sanctifies racist and egalitarian laws, such as the nation-state law and the draft evasion law. Shame. The Jewish community and the citizens of Israel deserve a proper government today before it's too late." And joining us now is Dr. Amir Kanifis, chairman of the Israeli Jewish Center, speaking to us from Isfahiya in northern Israel. Isfahiya. And Amir, first of all, I'm going to want to give you the chance to speak about what made you put out that message and more of the deeper meaning behind it.
Well, first of all, as you can imagine, the pain and it's so immense in the Druze villages when in the first day of our holiday, Eid al-Adha, we basically sacrifice one of most beautiful youth in our community, and we all the community, as you see, is sharing this pain and has been in Beit Jan today for the funeral. And what makes you more anger is the fact that we've been shouting so loud over the last months about our needs, about the way that we want to see our villages developed, the way that we would like to see the nation state law is being fixed, and the Kamenetz law and all other big issues that we are facing in recent months, and nobody hearing us. And as you could see, and the whole country and this government is remembered that there is a Druze community up there in the north only when there is another soldier is killed and another funeral, and it's basically makes us so angry about all this situation.
Right. Now, just a background for viewers, because we've discussed the nation-state law well before October 7th, that it tends to sort of codify a Jewish identity in the state of Israel, but members of the Jewish community and other minorities feel makes them in some way second-class citizens. But you also refer to the so-called issue of the ultra-Orthodox draft law. We should also mention other laws being passed by the government extending reserve duty for reservists, and a feeling that there are some members of the society doing less than their national duty and some doing more than their national duty, even though they're in some ways getting less rewarded for it.
Yeah, once again, we found out that basically we are equal partners only in the battlefield, and that's something wrong. That's something that must be fixed. There is no way that we can accept the fact that we are a full partner only on the battlefield and only in the morning. What we want to see is real partnerships also in the day life. We want to feel as a first-class citizens. We don't want to be a second-class citizens in this country. Israel is our country. We perceive ourselves as integral part of the Israeli society, and we've been saying that for so many years. And what we want to see is a real steps towards this equality. And for now, we only hear announcements from different leaderships. And what makes us more disappointed is the fact that we have a government that ignores our needs. That we have needs. The Druze community and the Druze villages is lacking behind in so many issues. And we need this support from the central government. And unfortunately, we don't do anything since they were elected. Now, it makes you so angry about this situation to the point that we have asking yourself so many big questions. Where are we going from here?
All right, well, that is a big question. Many in Israel, not just in the Jewish community, are asking, as Israel mourns all of those that lost their lives this weekend in Gaza. Of course, we join in the mourning of Captain Wasim Mahmoud.
Of course, we join in the mourning. We feel that we need to stand together as a one society. But as I said, we have to understand there is certain groups within this society that wants to be integral part of the state and the society, and all the racist laws should be removed very soon.
All right, Dr. Amir Kanifas, thank you for joining us on I-24 News. Shiri, did you want to respond?
I want to say how much I support everything Amir said, and I understand that Wissam, who died, was very gifted and talented and was in an excellence program, and I just want to my condolences to the Jewish community for losing one of its best, and we should have some sort of a new balance between rights and obligation between all Israelis.
Yes, and Jeremy, briefly.
I just want to say that they're not only brothers on the battlefield, they're also, we've worked very closely in the Foreign Service for over 40 years with close colleagues from the Jewish community, and I'm been so impressed by the commitment to Israel. And I think we should do everything we can to end this nation-state law, at least amend it in a way that would be amenable to their sensitivities.
Right, they've made very effective ambassadors.
And I think 90% of Israelis would agree.
Right, they made very effective ambassadors, some of whom I've had the privilege to know. Moving on, in a controversial prisoner swap, Sweden has released a former high-profile Iranian official accused of executing thousands of political prisoners in Iran. In return, Tehran freed the Swedish diplomat Johan Flodorus and a dual Swedish-Iranian national, Saeed Azizi, who Stockholm says were just pawns in a cynical game played by Tehran. Iranians critical of the regime accuse Sweden of surrendering to Tehran's hostage-taking tactics. More in this report by Yulia Pobogolova.
Sweden and Iran carried out a controversial prisoner exchange on Saturday. Stockholm released former Iranian official Hamid Nouri, arrested in 2019 and sentenced to life in prison for war crimes related to the mass execution and torture of political prisoners in Iran in 1988. Rights groups estimate that as many as 5,000 people were executed. Iran rolled out the red carpet for Nouri when he arrived back in Tehran.
I am Hamid Nouri. I am in Iran. God made me free.
In return, Iran released Swedish diplomat Johan Flodorus and dual Swedish-Iranian national Saeed Azizi. The Swedish prime minister accused the Islamic regime of illegal hostage-taking to achieve its political goals.
Iran used them both as pawns in a cynical negotiation game with the purpose of getting the Iranian citizen Hamid Nouri released from prison in Sweden.
Johan Flodorus was arrested in Iran in 2022 and charged with spying for Israel and, quote, corruption on earth, a crime punishable by death. Saeed Azizi was arrested in 2023 on charges of, quote, assembly and collusion against national security, and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Iranian opposition figures abroad criticized Sweden for yielding to Tehran's blackmail and hostage-taking tactics. Media outlet Iran International estimated that Sweden's decision could encourage more kidnappings and unlawful detentions. This development could embolden not only Iran, but also other regimes and organizations demonstrating that democratic nations could be coerced into compromising their principles and judicial decisions, a tactic that was seemingly adopted by Palestinian terror groups Hamas and Islamic Jihad, who are still holding 120 Israeli hostages in Gaza. Meanwhile, another Swedish-Iranian dual national, Ahmad Reza Jalali, remains imprisoned in Iran. He was arrested in 2016 when visiting Tehran to participate in a medical workshop and accused of spying for Israel. Iran refuses to recognize his Swedish nationality, but the fact that Jalali's death sentence has not been carried out for 7 years indicates he could be treated by Iran as another pawn in its hostage diplomacy.
And staying with Iran, its foreign ministry today lashed out at the G7 Conference of Nations, saying it should give up its, quote, destructive policies of the past. This after the G7 issued a statement while meeting in Italy this weekend, warning Iran it would face new sanctions if it continued its uranium enrichment program and the transfer of ballistic missiles to Russia in order to attack Ukraine. The G7 spoke out after an IAEA report warned that Iran has installed extra uranium-enriching centrifuges at Fordow and other sites. And, Jeremy, common thread between those two items, Iran flouting international norms, international standards, and getting away with it.
And making an art form out of taking hostages and bargaining them away. And I think that's obviously, but you've touched on the real key factor, is the nuclear program has never been as advanced as it is now. They've enriched uranium to very serious quantities, and they're basically only a step away from going up to military-grade uranium enrichment. And we still are not so sure to what extent they've advanced in the weaponization program. So I'd say that the bottom line is they're much closer to a military nuclear device than probably they've ever been in terms of timelines.
Right, and Shiri, with Israel, in a sense, distracted by its, you might say, from its conflict with Hamas, much of the Europe distracted, in the U.S. by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, or a sense maybe of Iran taking advantage of that as to accelerate its uranium enrichment program.
It's not a distraction. It's a global plan by anti-Western forces to weaken the West. And they all aligned, Russia, Iran, and in a sense, China. And this is what we're facing. And we have to understand that Israel is a vibrant democracy, and we need the U.S. and other allies like France to understand that, yes, we're the democratic post here, and you can see how vibrant democracy going to the streets. We're still trying to be a democracy, and I think it's a very dangerous time. Iran has built both its nuclear capabilities and its regional capabilities for years, and it's been deterring Israel from action, but and other allies for years in the area. One critical moment in time was the Aramco attack on Saudi Arabia in 2019, I believe. And unfortunately, the Trump administration didn't give a fierce response, and that echoed throughout the Middle East and the region. We have to be forceful. We have to be very forceful. We have to create deterrence, and we can't do it alone. We need our allies to do what they mean, what they say, and I think we should be much more strong on the financial side. There's a financial war. There is a lot of money going on here, and this is the avenue we haven't pursued it yet in the best means possible.
Right. All right. We are going to go back to the hostage issue for a moment. It's now 8 months since the October 7th attack on Israel. 120 families still waiting on news about their family members held captive in Gaza. Lishai Lavi is no exception, citing her daughters as motivation to not give up hope that their father, Omri Miran, will come home one day to kibbutz Nachal Oz from his captivity. Jody Notelevitz has that story.
It's another day that you wake up in the morning and you still think it's just a nightmare, and you understand it's the reality.
Every morning when Lishai Lavi wakes up, it gets harder and harder for her to remember how many days have passed since her nightmare began following the Hamas cross-border attack on Israel. Lavi's husband, Omri Miran, was one of the 250 hostages taken into Gaza that day by the terrorist group. and he remains in captivity over 250 days later. The last time he was seen was in a hostage video released in April. Lavi welcomed this sign of life, but mentioned how different he seemed.
To see him like this, it was really, really difficult. Everybody that know Omri, they know him, and the first thing that they said about him, that he have the biggest smile in the world, and he have the spark in his eyes. And when you see him, you see that he don't have his smile anymore, and he don't have the spark in his eyes.
She hasn't heard any new details of Omri since then. At the moment, the only thing she can do is focus on the two daughters she shares with Omri, almost 3-year-old Ronnie and 1-year-old Alma, who, she says, gives her the power she needs to continue.
I can say that my 2 beautiful little daughters give me the strength I think I need. I have to get up in the morning and take them to the Eden Garden and fight the fight of my life to bring Omri here. And I don't have anything else. This is my job.
In the meantime, peace mediators Egypt and Qatar are still working to reach a deal based on the most recent US peace proposal. As for Lishai, she expressed her hope that the Israeli government will be able to bridge any gaps in the deal so that the hostages will be able to come home.
I always said that there is no other options. Omri have to come back, and Omri come back. I saw him go, so I'm going to show him. I'm going to see him, come back here, and I'm going to do everything that I can for this.
All right, let's turn now to France. A week ago, the French Ministry of Defense ordered the organizers of the Eurosatory 224 Defense and Security Trade Show, that's a major arms industry exhibition, to ban the participation of Israeli companies, saying that the conditions are no longer right to host Israeli companies at the Paris show, given that the French president is calling for the cessation of IDF operations in Rafah. And by the way, 74 Israeli companies had arranged to take part in that arms show. Now, the move was strongly condemned by the Israeli government, but this weekend, things took an even worse turn. And here to tell us about it, our senior diplomatic correspondent, Owen Alterman.
Yeah, Kalev, the French Ministry of Defense issued the order that you described 2 weeks ago, but then it went into the court system where pro-Palestinian organizations wanted that even to be expanded, and the court essentially sided with them. So not only can't the companies set up shop inside this Eurosatory event, and as you mentioned, 74 companies, Kalev, not only had been signed up to do this, but had been actively preparing and putting out money to start setting up their booths and to invest in a huge event for them. But not only can't the companies be there, but even representatives of the company, who, by the way, couldn't hypothetically not even be Israeli. Maybe there is someone, a Frenchman, even someone who's non-Jewish, who's living in France, who works for one of these companies, not even allowed to walk into the building, according to this court's order. At any rate, this led to some interesting reactions from different parts of the Israeli government, with Yoav Gallant, the Israeli defense minister, saying that France should not be allowed to take part in any mediation between Israel and Hezbollah or Israel and Lebanon. Didn't directly tie it to this event, but given the court's ruling, I think that's the way it had been widely interpreted in Israel. At the same time, the foreign ministry coming out and saying, no, we don't see it that way. France is still a country that Israel wants to work with. And so you see this difference of opinion within the Israeli government that hasn't really been fully thrashed out. It seems to me, I understand the argument from the Foreign Affairs Ministry that this isn't generally the way that Israel should treat a medium-sized power that is an important country, and a country with which Israel has overall solid relations with. But on the other hand, I think Yoav Gallant is right that there needs to be some kind of countermeasure, because, Caleb, this isn't just a symbolic issue, like recognizing a Palestinian state or placing an embassy. This is an issue, and this is a move that has real consequences economically in terms of deals that would
well, let's call it what it is. This is a country doing BDS, basically, on Israel, and a country like France.
Well, I would love to hear what Jeremy thinks about the MFA's announcement. I would say this is ridiculous and it's just atrocious, because what is this decision based on? You can't go to Rafah. I, as the president of France, will tell you how to make your operation, your military operation. It's not based on ethical standard. It's not saying, it didn't say, oh, you deliberately killed children, so that's why you're not allowed to do the show. No, he's saying you're going into Rafah, and that's why. But in the consequences are that people will look at the Israeli military industry as, as a red flag.
Right. I do want to give Jeremy, because we have running out of time, or a chance to respond.
Well, look, first of all, I think it's really incredibly important to get into perspective that we do need our allies. And this is not just a war that is fought in the battlefield. This is a war for public opinion. And there's a growing call against Israel's legitimacy, a greater call for boycotts against Israel in many different areas. Could be in terms of commercial areas, academic, and now this is also as an example. And I can understand, frankly, my old institution of trying to sort of calm and to find a balance between our interests here. At the end of the day, we have a multi-front war, and we need allies. And France is an ally, maybe not the most important one, but it is an ally.
All right, I'm sorry they ran out of time. Owen Altman, Sherry Klein-Grossman, Ambassador Jerry Missachar, thank you for joining us. And you spoke about a war of opinion that's going on around the world, being fought by Israel, by authorities, by Jewish groups. But the real battle over Israel's image is also being fought by individual advocates, especially young people on social media. Among those is the American Jewish hip-hop musician who's known as the rapper Kosher Dills. Nama Kadosh sat down with him to hear why he has taken up the fight for Israel and the Jews.
How are you?
Good to see you. I'm good.
Meet Rami Ibn Ash, or as he's known in the music scene, Kosher Dills. He doesn't surrender any element of his identity. At night, he performs and creates. By day, he's an activist and advocate for Israel.
I love Hezbollah because he's putting peace in Lebanon.
Weren't they responsible for that big bomb, that tragedy in Beirut?
No.
The son of Israeli immigrants, who was born in New Jersey, experienced along with other Israelis around the world the rupture of October 7th, and since then he's been devoting his time to Israel advocacy.
We've seen all the pro-Palestine protests abroad, especially in the universities, young generation. Seems like they hate Israel almost.
Everyone likes the underdog in America and outside the world, and they're disregarding the fact that Israel is basically made up of all minorities. You look at what happened on October 7th, they filmed it all. No one cares, and they filmed it all. No one cares. We're showing you, hey, no, this woman just said this happened to her. No, and these people said these children have been bombed from Israeli bombs. American, no one cares. 1,400 people is a lot of people to kill.
Of course. So it's 9,000 people.
They can't be the guts to do that, to kill the Aqaba.
Well, I love your shirt first.
Thank you very much.
I think what's special about what you're doing is, because I've seen your videos, you bring them to the public in such a comic and light way, and very casual way that everyone can relate.
And my job is really not to listen to it. My job is just to say, okay. And you go, yeah, just like it. You explain it to me.
I mean, you don't want to say anything?
Why are you covering I'm not covering my face.
Because I obviously can't explain it to you, so you should explain. Today's Father's Day. So I think today's like a special one where they're asking for to bring the fathers home. And I know people that, have relatives there. Opa. Noah, Shlomi, Almog, and Andre. Tov, Shivatam Abaita. Good you came back.
Rami, many artists, such as Jerry Seinfeld and Kylie Jenner, have spoken about the damage to their image due to their support for Israel. For Rami, the connection between art and politics is necessary.
So I've got to ask, you've been here 4 times since October 7th, back and forth to New York and Israel. And you keep coming back and you keep showing up on social media and speaking about that, speaking about the conflict, speaking about the hostages. Why? Why is it so important to you to do that?
I've been doing Jewish Israel things since like 2006. I think my first, Israel event or whatever. I played with Matasiyahu in 2004. Well, I think, like, you know, I didn't serve, and I'm not, like, in the military here. I think my whole family, just in general, has been sort of like this frontline community. And me, I've always just had music and comedy and TV and, like, creative outlets. And I think, you know, you leave the physical stuff to these people. When it comes to creative, let me make it.
Bring the family home, we got the world saying, cry to death, I can't sleep, that's the worst pain.
Kol hakavod to Kosher Dills. That's the end of our program. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to be off for the next few days, and I'd like to, on a personal note, congratulate my daughter Shoshana Ben David on her impending wedding to Yair Taub. Mazel tov to the couple. But you can continue to watch us, of course, follow us on our website and follow this program in the coming days. Thanks.
Tel Aviv is ranked the happiest city in the world and the best place to own a home. For 3 generations, the Ben Shalom family has built boutique apartment buildings in the most desirable locations. From restoration in historical locales to homes along Park Hayarkon, Ben Shalom is a one-stop shop from start to finish and friends for life.